groceries and how quickly he plans to move on both of those fronts. And then his posture on retribution against his perceived political adversaries. You know, he is suggesting that he'll keep some distance from the FBI and the Justice Department in a way perhaps he didn't during his first term. So he's saying, you know, those decisions about investigations, they'll be left up to the people that I put in those agencies. However, you know, some of these folks should probably be in jail. And so, you know, that message comes off as a little bit mixed, and he's saying it knowing that the people that he's putting in these jobs are people who share his views on these issues. And so it'll be very interesting to see how that plays out.
It will be, Eugene, and to hear him back away from what he had posted on Truth Social that he did want to go after President Biden. He backed away from that. Yeah. He said his success is going to be his retribution, but as Carol notes, there was some mixed messaging. Broadly speaking, he had some pretty strong language for the January 6th committee.
Yeah, I think one of the things that was most fascinating is he didn't seem very combative in this interview, right? Including on those points, right? He said some names. He said Benny Thompson, Liz Cheney, maybe they should be in jail, maybe not. That's someone else's decision. But he didn't want to fight with you, right? And that's something that he often wants to do. So it shows you, one, that he feels emboldened. He won this election. He feels ready to move on. And I thought what was most fascinating is there's no ideological purity with him, and that popped up over and over and over again, right? There's a patchwork of different policy prescriptions for things that usually, if you're a Republican, you're just kind of, you know, this, and this, and that's what we care about. That wasn't here with Donald Trump. And I think that kind of gives voters what they wanted, which was not exactly a Republican who's going to do all of the things that Republicans typically do.
It's a fascinating way to put it, Mark, that there's no ideological purity that we heard, but he was very clear about what his agenda items were, and he feels emboldened that he believes he has a mandate after his decisive win.
Well, he should, and I thought he looked very relaxed and confident in your long interview covering a lot of topics. I do think that you're going to see a flurry of activity in the first 100 days from the executive branch, but I do think something that's being underappreciated here from a legislative agenda is what is the legislative agenda? The one item that's really there is going to be trying to renew the tax relief package from 2017. And when that was passed, 12 House Republicans defected. So we talk about the fact that there are 53 Republican senators, which should help him in his confirmations. But Speaker Johnson's going to have an enormous task next year, and it's going to be all to actually can lose. And so getting legislation through the Congress is going to be very difficult. And certainly if Trump isn't getting his way, he's going to blame Senate and House leadership for that.
And those tax cuts are very unpopular across the country, which is another challenge.
Come on.
They are in every piece of data, Mark. They are in every piece of data. That's why it's interesting that it's his agenda.
Kamala would have done a lot better.
You know, one of the things that struck me, Kristen, yes, the tone was different, but it doesn't mean it's a difference in his priorities or his policies. Because even when you listen to what he had to say about retribution will be through success. That's not saying he's not going to go after his political enemies. What I heard was him trying to give some space for himself for plausible deniability, because he picked these people, and Carol touched on this. Pam Bondi and Kash Patel are election deniers. Kash Patel is somebody who has empathized with QAnon. They know what the direction is. He does not need to direct them. This is why he picked them. They have passed the loyalty test. So what struck me is more tone, not a difference in what he intends to do or what he wants the people he's nominating to do.
It's a really critical point. He's also put hardliners in charge of his immigration policy, which I thought it was a big headline for him to say, we are deporting everyone, Eugene, though he said, yes, he wants to try to work out a deal for Dreamers.
Yeah, I think that is where he's thought the most about when you think about what his policies are going to be, is immigration. When you went through tick by tick of the kinds of things that we're seeing, he had a lot of ideas, and it was kind of the most clarity we've gotten on immigration from him. I will also say he and his team feel like he has the backing of the American people, especially on mass deportation, because in some polls, 53% of Americans say that they're for mass deportation. Now, when you dig into kind of what that means and whether you want your neighbors to get out of the country, or what happens with children, or when you see that woman that he's talking about getting pulled away, is that different? And he talked about, I think most interestingly, the public might turn against us on immigration, so they have to be careful there, is what he's saying.
Carol.
That was what struck me, is that he seems a little uncertain about how some of this stuff's going to play out. Yes, he's going to do it. But, when you talk about birthright citizenship, first of all, there are other countries that have birthright citizenship. It's not just the United States. But he said, if we can do it by an executive order, maybe we'll have to take it to the people, suggesting some sort of constitutional amendment. And on mass deportations, he talked about how this might play out publicly. He talks about the woman who's crying and the cameras are capturing her as she's being deported. And he said, then the public turns against us. So he's not real confident that this is going to play out exactly how he wants it.
Such a revelatory moment there. Jen, we talked about foreign policy as well. Of course, we're all watching what's happening in Syria. The government has been toppled. I talked to him about Ukraine and NATO. Boy, he really left the door open to potentially pulling out of NATO.
He certainly did, which I don't think should be a surprise. He also refused, after you pushed him repeatedly, to answer the question as to whether he talked to Vladimir Putin.
Yes,
and when you look
I tried.
you certainly, when you look at the statement he put out in response to Assad fleeing the country, it was almost defensive of Putin and defensive of the Russians' interest. So this is definitely a massive shift. There is an allegiance, an affinity for Russia that is different than what we have had in Democratic and Republican presidents for decades.
And Mark, he was very clear. There will likely be less funding for Ukraine with the last 30 seconds we have.
Well, sure, that's been his position all along.
Yeah.
I think that the ones who are celebrating most right now in the situation in Syria is the fact that I should say the ones who I think are most concerned are Putin, the Ayatollah, and Tulsi Gabbard.
And by the way, I asked him about Tulsi Gabbard. He said he has confidence in her, and Pete Hegseth, who's also another embattled cabinet pick. Thank you all for being here for a fantastic conversation. That is all for today. Thank you.